Hello everybody. Sorry for the delay in the videos for this series, even though none of you listen to this series. Anyways, this is gonna be Act 4 of Hell Has a Prison. Woo! I awoke with water lapping against my head. For a brief moment, as I opened my eyes, I thought it had all been a dream, some horribly long freakish nightmare that had never truly happened. I stayed still, staring at the sky above me. I took in the cool air, watching the clouds roll by, patches of blue interrupting the other ray's continuous flow of puffy vapor. I might not have been home or back on the university grounds, but it was Earth, back to the real world, and if I resisted the urge to ever look at myself, I could have kept the illusion going, not knowing whether I was back in my old skin or was still infested by scales and teeth. I could stay blissfully ignorant. Reality set back, and once I confirmed the nature of my experiences, trying to run a sharpened fingernail along my scaled forearm only brought more shock as it passed right through. I flipped my hands over and back again, staring at both sides for an answer. Standing up, I could see the trees of the forest through my hand. Walking ashore, I saw every stone perfectly clear through my foot. I had been dropped into the middle of nowhere, but at least it was Earth. Turning around, I saw an old asphalt road next to the lake and started walking. It was strange. I'd forgotten what this kind of quietness was like. There obviously wasn't the ambient screams of humanity's dams singing in synchronized agony, but it was the empty void of sound from my cell. There was that little whistle of breeze through the pines, the cawing of some bird in the distance, and on the road I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in the prison. I was entranced by it all. I'd forgotten that I was free, free from that dark abyss. Perhaps my unconsciousness was still weighed down by the task at hand, but any time I would grow concerned, I simply remember why I was doing it for the good of mankind. They needed me. I was the only one who could do it. They would thank me if they knew. Help, even. It wouldn't be that bad. My heart must have become part demon as well, for it swallowed those lies with unquestioned glee. The sun began to set, and soon after all light vanished, and seemed my time in the dark had come in handy. I didn't have army goggles level of night vision, but I could clearly see better than I had as a human. Still, all I could make out was the old road beneath my feet, and the shadowy outlines of the first few rows of trees on either side of me. I heard the rustling of night creatures in the bushes, and was startled for a moment by a few sets of eyes looking back in my direction. The trickling flow of water danced on the stones and roots of the forest. The air smelled of greenery. All was calm. Eventually, the woods began to grow thinner, and the road came to an intersection with a red blinking light, a sign of nearby civilization. There were no stars or bright full moon in the sky to comfort me this night, so onwards from the light I walked, until it was but an uncanny sight from some distance away. One thing I'd noticed was the lack of feeling in my feet. It didn't feel as though I was pressing my bare soles and heels against rough pebble-covered asphalt, but just a smooth surface. Town was first visible when the sky began to glow again, down in the shadow of a little mountain. Even though I had expected it, not being noticed by the townspeople felt odd. I mean, here I was, this scaly she-demon thing, wandering around some town in the middle of nowhere, and not one head turned towards me. No eyes went wide in fear, no shrieking mouths, just people living their normal daily lives. With demons clinging to their backs, arms and claws dug into their host, the monsters were just as transparent as I was. Most were holding their human with a good grip, and some more tightly, others with a more loving embrace, and a few were barely hanging on for dear life. The majority of them gave me some dirty stares. They knew something was up if a Cambion was wandering about the surface. I rubbed my eyes and tried imagining the people without the creatures on them, but it was just impossible. They were still there, whispering into the ears of passerbys, feeding lies to the void. I was worried they might hop off their humans and hunt me down, or dig down into the earth to alert Mephistopheles about my presence. But instead, they stuck to their roles and continued plaguing mankind with their poisoned words. So after a little while, I started trying to figure out How to get to the space elevator. Humanity's second Tower of Babel. My first thought was to try a bar or something. There was sure to be some kind of information there, and if it was so close to being completed, there'd be some buzz about it there. It didn't take too long to find the place, and by natural instinct, when I tried to open the door, my hand simply swept through. Stumbling forward, I found myself floating just above the floor of the bar on my stomach. I was surprised, less about being able to go through the door, but more so that it didn't feel like anything special at all. No different than walking through an empty room. Looking around, I saw a different kind of group than I was used to. It was all the early birds, the coffee drinkers, the old men who meet every morning in their usual spot in the corner of the building, talking loud enough for everyone else to hear them. There wasn't the dirty smell of sweaty dudes blended with 2 cups of hops, the tired laughter that came after the end of another 9 to 5 shift. But this meant their information would be more reliable and not twisted by the effects of alcohol. I took a seat at the bar and waited. I could hear the demons murmuring quietly to their humans, but on occasion a conversation would arise between themselves, wondering what I was doing here. A glance in their direction, any sign of interest in what they were saying, and they go back to do their jobs, silent unless corrupting their person. From the people in the bar, I heard murmurs about the elevator. There was word about a site up north towards Lake Michigan that made my current location easier to figure out. The TV news offered the most information. There was video footage of the monstrous building, but on the screen it looked just like one large tunnel that disappeared into the clouds. There were many wires supporting the structure, and an entire facility surrounding it. The reporter claimed that the top world functioned as both a pit stop for space stations to switch out work crews and as a spaceship assembly location and launch zone. Though some features of the elevator were still in the work, they were attempting to put it together in their first shuttle on the station. There were apparently a few other elevators in the works in Russia and the East Asian Alliance as well, but that America's progress was the furthest by far. A few of the demons beside me snickered. I got up from my spot and turned to leave, so they never noticed. Their demon cursed me off after I bumped into them. I ignored the being and left. Floating through the door again, I finally noticed a feeling of some kind. It was like holding your breath in the shower when washing your hair. Not suffocating, but a slightly startling lapse of oxygen flow. The ground still felt smooth to walk on, regardless of its texture. I thought more about seeing what was possible in the spirit-like form and hopped off the wooden porch of the bar. My feet never touched the sidewalk. Instead, my toes hovered just an inch or two over its surface. My balance felt off, though I couldn't fail. I was floating, without the feeling of being suspended or tugged in some direction. Laughing nervously, I moved my leg to step forward. I stayed on the spot. One bead of ghostly sweat formed on my forehead. I tried to step forward again. Nothing. I tried the other leg. No movement. My mind shifted to why demons never got off of their humans. Was this why? Did they know about getting stuck like this? Could I break free? I was moving fine earlier. Why couldn't I now? My breathing quickened and my heart went to fourth gear. I tried to ask passing citizens for help, but of course none could hear me. I tried grabbing onto one to drag me away, but I was swiftly kicked off by their demon, who laughed mockingly as it was steered away. They all laughed. They knew something I didn't. Easy, Hella, you're overreacting. I sucked in a large breath of mountain air and let it go. Whether it actually entered my lungs or not is another question, but the action helped me calm just a bit. I began stretching and moving my limbs around in strange ways, hoping to find some answer eventually. After swinging through the air wasn't an option, I found the air when straightening my leg muscles, like walking on tiptoe. My body suddenly began to float upward, toes aimed at the ground. I relaxed my butt legs, then repeated the action. I moved again. Curious, I pulled my toes back towards me, and I started flailing as I was sent backwards. It was a weird system, but one that worked with time. So they weren't laughing because I was doomed. I just looked like a complete moron. I glared at one passing by, still smirking rudely at me. I stole the wicked smile from its face and gave a wave before gliding off, leaving the demon behind in a bewildered state. I had spent enough time in town and immediately made way for the highway. I followed the signs that led north and around the mountain, following along the side of the road. Despite being dead already, that old common sense of a human stayed intact. By leaning forward, I found that I could move faster, and so I drifted alongside transfer trucks and cars alike through the forest road. Each time one would pass, I whispered to them, even if they couldn't hear me. I wanted them to know that I was going to save them. They were going to be okay. Once I was around the mountain, I could see it. Last night it had been blocking the elevator, but now it was quite clear to view. It was an odd sight, just a large straight line cutting through the sky, with little orange lights that slowly went on and off. Nothing was as tall as the tower, and the top just blended into the overcast sky above. Only having to straighten the muscles in my legs meant I required less breaks. It was still strenuous to stay so stiff for so long, so I closed the distance on the elevator quickly, and each day the structure only appeared more menacing, as if challenging me to topple it over. The news report didn't do the place justice. There wasn't a single area on pause at the facility. Bodies and trucks were in constant motion, coming and going from many places, and a lot of guards. My human nature came back up for a moment as my butt cheeks clenched seeing them walking around with guns and full body armor. Releasing a held breath, I remembered yet again that I was ghostly and wandered towards the stronghold. The tower itself was placed in the center of the compound, and just one look easily showed that it wasn't just for carrying people. Its diameter had to be that of 3 house lengths, and was not cylindrical but rectangular in nature. Each side has a large door, and leading to the door was a steel bridge that traveled over a large crack that surrounded the structure. It seemed odd that they would have such a hole around the elevator, but walking to its edge, I saw why. The tower has also been built somewhat into the earth, with a great many support beams keeping it still. Looking down brought on an ugly feeling in my gut, and when I realized why, the feeling grew even stronger. I backed away from the demon hole slowly, trying to begin my plan to tear this bridge to heaven down. The monstrous height certainly fought against my confidence, standing over me like a god itself. Forest had been cut for miles around, offering a wide open space around the complex, empty and quiet. I walked the facility grounds for the day, watching them continue reinforcing the elevator and sending things up to the station at the top. I saw hundreds of people leaning over desks in the office department, filling out paperwork and taking calls. There were metal workers and contractors and workmen galore in the workshop, putting together pieces of shuttle and tower alike, and every single one of their demons were grinning ear to pointed ear. They knew that the tower almost had enough support to make it stable enough for a demonic invasion, if humanity saw it stable enough to send spaceship parts through. One day I decided to go up to the elevator with a load of parts. A crew of workers surrounded a part of the new shuttle's fuselage, and armed guards were sent with them. At first I wondered why the guards were there, but I was lucky enough to witness the answer. One of the workers inside the elevator turned towards the tarp-covered load and proceeded to scream in a different language. My best guess would be Russian, as he drew a device from his shirt before he could activate whatever terrible plot he'd prepared. There were 3 suits of armor tackling him to the ground and cuffing him before escorting him away. The demons were all arguing with the terroristic creature, who screamed back at all of them about how he tried his hardest. The elevator was shut down for a few days after that. Everyone was getting double-checked all the time, the tension in the air was palpable, and the lack of work towards further stabilization of the elevator pissed the demons off quite a bit. When they finally decided to use the elevator again, there was no load or object going up, only people. The trip was slow, and at a certain point up the shaft, the lift came to a stop. At this layer, there were suits and helmets ready for them, and each got dressed in preparation for working in space. Once they were ready, the lift started again. As I looked around, I watched the demons shift and groan as though they were uncomfortable about something. I learned soon enough where their annoyance came from. Not long after the elevator started again, A searing pain spread from the roots of my hair to the calluses on my feet. I huddled over in pain as flashes of light erupted before my eyes, and I could hear the screams of the other damned souls around me. None of the humans so much as moved, but I was screeching on the floor, begging for the rapid visions of gold and quartz building to stop. Though the piercing wails and the loud noises smashing in my brain, I heard a garbled, thousand voice speak. Those who failed their father shall never enter this kingdom. When I came to, the elevator was beginning its descent with a different group of workers. They were swapping out. I braced for the return of Heaven's firewall and managed to stay awake throughout its time. Dizzied and hurt, I floated off the elevator and let the tears flow for a bit. The snickering of passing demons couldn't add to the pain of being reminded of my citizenship in hell. Returning to Earth had really made me a mess. After the pain ceased and some more exploring, I finally discovered a flicker of hope for my plans. While searching around one of the warehouses, I came across two guards talking to one another. Their conversation came to a close as a third man approached from down the hall, wearing more of a clean-cut uniform than a Kevlar suit. "Good day, sir," the first guard said. The other nodded quietly in response. "Good day, lads. Kimball? I'm sorry, I don't think I caught yours." The quiet guard seemed to hesitate nervously for a second, answering, "Howard, sir. Ethan Howard." "Ah, yes. Well, are either of you on tomorrow's lift?" The officer pulled out a small piece of glass, the size of a smartphone, and tapped it in a few places before putting it away. "Just talking about it, we both are," Kimball responded. "Well then, safe voyage, gentlemen, and if there's another Rusky spy on it, I'm trusting you two to take care of it, eh?" The higher-up tipped his hat before striding off. Kimball looked to his friend, who seemed scared to death what was said. "Hey, Ethan, there's nothing to worry," Kimball himself said, shaking his fellow guard's shoulder. "We're just transporting the fuel tanks, that's it. Usually the only explosion that have happened involved the shuttle itself when taking off. As long as no one is dicking around on the lift tomorrow, everything will be a piece of cake." Fuel tanks? It was almost too good to be true. An easy enough way to do the job. All I had to do now was to follow one of these two up the lift and somehow corrupt him into destroying it before he gets tackled by the other guards. My gaze fell upon the quiet one. He was very evidently worried about tomorrow. If he was emotionally distressed, it could make it easier to manipulate him. Howard just nodded, then looked at his wristwatch. "I'm off the clock. Gotta go get some shut-eye." "Alright, man. Sleep well. Tomorrow we become the Space Marines," Kimball laughed, and fake-punched Howard, who smiled gingerly and waved as he walked off. I made sure to follow. Howard did not leave the base. Instead, he made his way over to a barracks for the guards. Inside his cramped little room of 4-6, he sat alone, staring at the floor, shirtless. My lustful side grew anxious seeing him strip, but I stayed focused. "It'll be all right tomorrow," his demon whispered, giving me a look ripe with age. He must have suspected I was up to something. Howard just continued whispering to himself as the demon tried to coax him. I just watched and waited. Night came and Howard was already asleep by the time the stars were out. It was so weird, still seeing the top of the elevator disappearing into nothing. His demon continued to stare at me from the bedpost it rested on, pretending to run its long, sharp fingers through his hair, while giving him sultry lullabies to sleep well by. I was watching the monster as well, eyeing the prize beneath its feet, but his demon was going to try as hard as he could to not let me get near him, nor would he let Howard do anything stupid. At least, anything that would hurt the tower. And I had no physical connection to the world either, so there was nothing I could do. Then I recalled the bar, when I bumped into a customer. No, not the customer. The Hellspawn must have noticed that I'd figured it out, because just before my own claws were wrapped around its throat, there was a look of shock and anxiety I'd never seen in one's eyes before. I dug the tips deep through the soft portion of its neck, slowly pushing through the muscles and tissues, until I felt a hard tube in my hand. With a few yanks, I squeezed my hand around its larynx and pulled the organ from its body, ripping and tearing through the remaining skin to get it out. At first, the demon scratched and clawed at me, but soon it could grasp and croak as it fell to the floor. It still struggled and flailed about like all the others, for the undead cannot die again. I didn't stand over the creature and take amusement in its suffering. Instead, I continued with my plan and approached Howard. Now, I had dictionaries of honeyed words prepared to turn men on, but to make one commit mass murder, that was a different story. I tried whispering in his ear, but got no response. Then he rolled over, and the demon behind me began to freak out more. My curiosity was greatly piqued by the sight of a strange hole in Howard's back, shaped almost like my own nether regions, disgustingly enough. It wasn't actually right on the skin, but rather hovered over around the center of his spine, like a portal. Hesitantly, I moved my hand towards the hole and stopped when it began to open wider. Inside, I saw a blue essence shimmering and reached forward to touch it. We made contact. My hand did not pass through the entity. Grabbing the energy, I tried to pull on it, and slowly, with much straining, it began to come out of the body. So I decided to keep pulling. It began to get larger, spreading along the limbs, before popping out in a surprising and swift motion. It was Howard, or his soul rather, eyes closed, drifting through the room in slumber, before slowly going up, up, up through the ceiling. I turned to the body. It had gone limp. My surprise turned to dread, realizing what I'd done. I just killed him, and created a perfectly good skin suit. The dark side of my soul started to invade my mind again, and as much as I hated it, my inner demon was right. My spirit felt compelled to enter the vessel. This was probably going to be the easiest way for me to take care of the job. Besides, I was going to be killing way more people later. Now wasn't the time to get upset over one guard. Breathing in and out, I reached inside the corpse with my left hand. The inside was hollow, and my arm traveled up his like I was putting on a jacket. Then the other sleeve, followed by my head, body, and legs. All of them slipped inside smoothly, and the moment everything clicked into place, I was gasping for air. I coughed into the pillow profusely and sank into the bed. The weight of having a body returned, and I had to grow used to the extra effort required to move. Closing my eyes, I let myself fall into slumber for the first time in years. The alarm next to Howard's bed going off awoke me many hours later, forcing me from rest. I find myself sweating rather heavily. I didn't have any night terrors or such, and the air was still quite cold, so I assumed that Howard had been feeling under the weather before I took off. But stepping into the washroom to take a cold shower to cool down, I saw it in the mirror, the peeling skin on my cheek. I touched it and recoiled in pain. It felt as though it were sunburned. A bit of worry began to brawl in my body. Howard didn't have any sunburns yesterday, when I saw him talking to the other guard. It felt strange undressing as a man, and even weirder feeling the shaft between my legs. Still, I stepped into the shower and began to wash up. It was no good, as the cold water made me realize the heat was coming from within me. The body was overheating because of me, and I could only wonder how long I had until something bad happened to it. But today was the day. This was the day I would do my job and earn my permanent freedom. "Howard, hurry up!" I whipped my head around to see Kimball standing in the doorway of the brushroom. "We have to be at the gate in 15. Get dried and dressed, then move your ass." On it," I answered. I should have expected the deeper voice of Ethan Howard, but it was still weird to experience. Hurrying out of the water, I did as Kimball said and ran outside, where he was waiting to jog with me to the elevator. The sun was just above the edge of the horizon, but not quite hiding behind it yet. "You feeling alright, man? You looked bad yesterday, but damn." I was distracted by his demon glaring me down. "Huh? Oh yeah, I'm fine. Just a little cold is all." Kimball's demon just kept watching me, then whispered to him, "He's not looking too great. Keep an eye on him." The creature then turned to me, his hand just so slightly stuck inside the crack on Kimball's back. "Damn, you got devoured overnight, huh? What a shame." I almost breathed out in relief. The demon didn't know about the possession. He just thought that Howard's soul had devoured his body. This was going much better than I thought it would, and if I kept the act up, then I'd be successful in my mission. As we were approaching the bridge, another guard stopped us. "Names and badges, gentlemen." she demanded. Kimball reached for his and handed it off, while I quickly fumbled around the body armor for mine. I could feel my heart racing unnaturally fast, and it wasn't just from the nervousness about being caught. The guard gave me a look. You okay, buddy? I froze up. I need an excuse. Now. Oh, yeah, just nervous about to trip up. After the other day and everything. Kimball stepped in to speak for me. It's his first time up as well. Just anxious for nothing. Ah, I see. The guard smiled at me before returning my badge and gesturing to my forehead. Explained to Sweat. Well, just follow the procedure and everything will be fine. I nodded to the guard and thanked Kimball, but deep down, I could see that his demon was beginning to get through to him. I caught a glint of distrust in his eyes before he turned around and stepped onto the bridge. Try as I might, it was getting harder to act natural. The heat had grown exorbitantly, and patches along my arms had grown increasingly itchy. I scratched myself roughly while walking along the bridge, my free hand resting on my holster. Besides Kimball and I, there were about 10 other guards in the elevator. They had upped the numbers without my noticing, but I was getting more and more anxious by the minute on both fronts, as the doors locked me in with the minimum replacement crew and large numbers of guards. I attempted to stay calm as every single demon was watching me. The lift began to rise, and now there was no turning back. I swallowed a poor attempt to soothe my parched throat as I watched the sky pass between the cracks of metal rising constantly. Gazing around, each hellspawn still had an eye on me. It was nerve-wracking, trying to analyze the situation while not appearing to be looking straight at the monsters. You were right, Howard. My head whipped back forward to find Kimball giving me a look. I doubted his own human intentions were sinister, but I was still concerned about the rifle slung over his torso, hand on the grip. Yeah, I'm alright. Are you sure that this thing is safe? I whispered to him. Maybe the best move was to act nervous for a different reason. I mean, they're still building onto it. Those are just extra supports. Uncle Sam wants to be number one, so they don't mind us going up and starting the rocket race while they fix the ladder we're standing on. He shifted in his gear, head cocked and looking down on me. You should know that, Ethan. I went too far. My eyes raced around the room once again. The demons were murmuring to one another, pointing towards me and glaring with increasingly angry stares. I glanced to my right where the load stood. There was no tarp covering it this time, and I could see the two tanks very clearly sitting side by side. I reached up to scratch my face, but pulling back a part of the hood, I felt a familiar texture. A crumbly, crusty texture that left a streak of black across my grey glove. My gaze shot upwards again. Kimball's other hand was resting on his rifle. My hand stayed dead still on the side of my pistol holster. Terax, what are you doing? Kimball's demon demanded, staring me down. Terax, what are you talking about, Furin? Another guard's demon stated. He got devoured last night by this one. He was just operating this one here yesterday, and now he's acting all crazy. The other demon whispered quickly in his guard's ear before pointing at me. Did you even consider a possession? There were reports of a Cambion walking around the facility. Thorin looking at the demon, then slowly returned his line of sight to meet mine. So it is you. I knew I wouldn't be able to make the shot from here. I washed forward and tackled Kimball, who fought back furiously. But though I was on top to start, he quickly pushed back against my weakening form. I could feel the charcoal on my forearms crunching and breaking apart under the pressure of Kimball's strength. There was only one option, one way to take control of the fight, and keep myself from being shot in the back a few seconds. My pistol was out of the holster in a second, the barrel pressed to Kimball's head. He immediately ceased resistance and sat still, a scowl written across his face. I pulled him to his feet and hid behind him, stating backwards towards the load. Stay back, all of you! I screamed, my voice becoming hoarse. I'll fucking do it, so no one move. The guards followed, rifles aimed towards me. A slight smirk crossed my face in the heat of the moment. Unless they were all perfect shots, they might do my work for me. Keep them back! Fern screamed at the other demons who were whispering rapidly into their humans' ears. Don't let them fire. They might hit the fuel tanks. It's what she wants. So, what are we supposed to do? One demon responding of the shouting of the humans. Fern growled, then looked back at me. Take your humans over. My heart skipped a beat before starting to go faster than ever. Are you insane? Another protest. That many possessions on their doorsteps? Are you crazy? They'll come swarming like hornets to find out who's killing his children. It's better than just letting her destroy the tower, Fern screamed, giving me a quick look. Ugh, enough of this. You lot can play pansies, but I'm taking care of this. In one swift movement, Fern shouted a fierce battle cry as he plunged his arm deep into Kimball's back and ripped the man's soul out. As a confused, ethereal Kimball drifted upwards, his body collapsed into my grip, the weight throwing me off and nearing knocking me over, but as I replanted my feet and pushed him back up, the body whipped round with a brutal hook punch. I felt the chair of my neck crumble from the blow, and I landed on my side. I struggled to fight out of Fern's grasp as he grappled my suit, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the confused guard troop beginning to fall to the floor, only for their blue essence to fly towards the heaven. Their ghastly howls filled the air as their corpses rose from the ground, most already beginning to burn and blacken. I looked back at Fern, who hadn't thrown a punch since. His head was lowered to his chest and shaking, as though he were fighting back against something. In a flash, his face met mine, and fire exploded from his eyes and mouth. Running out of time, he whispered in a gravelly voice, slowly dragging me over towards the others. The rest of the possessed were burning as well, some completely combusting on the spot and falling to the metal floor. A loud bang sounded, and I felt a bit of force push against me from my other side, and turning the way I saw the bloody remains of an exploded corpse, some piece of fabric still burning. I could feel holes puncturing my limbs as the possessed with more control began firing at me and Furren. Furren was still dragging me towards the railing on the edge of the lift. Limping along the way, I swung and flailed against his grip. My own body was failing me as well. My back slammed against the pole, and Furren took a moment to breathe. I looked around to see the other zombie-like bodies moving towards me to help. There was no time left. Losing here meant my mission would be for naught. The demons would never let me near the tower again, and I doubted there would be any other transports as easy to destroy as this. The burning sensation subsided, just long enough for feeling to return to my fingers. The pistol was still in my hand. Smacking it around did nothing. Furren hoisted me up to my feet, getting ready to push me over the platform's edge. Grabbing the hand that held me by rigor mortis, I pushed the barrel of the gun against his wrist and fired over and over again. The flesh oozed and popped as the arms separated, and I fell forward as Furren howled in agony. I forced myself to my feet through the waning energy and blazing heat from within my body, and aimed for the load. As though the entire universe were against this day, there was another explosion, but it was not another corpse. The lift jerked to a stop, and we all were knocked into the air. I could feel the rushing of wind through the elevator shaft, and when I nearly and finally hit the floor by the load, I caught a glimpse of what had caused the blast. My blood ran cold. There, floating outside of the tower, was a massive armored man. In his hand, he wielded a great halberd, and his form shimmered in a golden flame. His armor was similar to what I saw in the depths, but where theirs was ruined and ancient, this one appeared as though it was fashioned not seconds ago, clean and free of blemish. His great white wings spread out and flapped slowly, maintaining his position in the air, and pushing warm winds into the elevator shaft. He even spoke in the same tongue as the rest. But the one thing that stood out was a face, where the others were unholy smoke and nothing more. This one wore a golden mask to hide the wisp that snuck their way out from time to time. The face of the mask was simplistic and one of indifference, neither joy or woe, but one of a neutral position. A mask of an observer. Shit, it's here! One demon screamed, raising his rifle with sloppy demeanor and spraying the angel down with bullets galore. Others joined in, trying to kill the invincible being. He entered disgruntled, and with one swift cleave, he struck down 6 of the guards, their bodies bursting to flame and forcing the demons out. They rocked and moaned on the floor, creating their bleeding chest cavities, as the angel approached them one by one and pushed the tip of his weapon through their skulls. Their moan turned to unending gurgles, with bits of brain matter and skull alike spilling out their mouths and ears. I tried to push myself up yet again, but by now, whatever skin or muscle was left on my arms were minimal. As rods of bones were scraped clean between pieces of bleeding meat, my pistol was gone, but I could see the rifle. Kibble had dropped nearby. Pushing my body across the floor with my feet, I looked back and forth between the gun and the angel, hoping it wouldn't spot me. My heart was beating faster, like a bomb building up to explode. I collapsed on top of the rifle, my body barely able to breathe now. The angel was running out of targets, so I had to act fast. I painfully slapped one hand onto the rifle's frame, then positioned it into my hand and aimed in the position of the load above me. Then, I just pulled the trigger. Though most of the shots missed, a good number pierced both of the tanks, but my relief turned to panic as nothing happened. I could see the liquids leaking out, but there was no reaction as they pulled together. Taking a deep breath, my lungs felt a bit refreshed, and I found the energy to put myself up against one of the tanks. My eyes were throbbing like they were about to explode out of my head, and had I not already been undead, I likely would have blacked out from the heat stroke well before this point. I met the angel's gaze. He spun the halberd around, clearing it of blood, and advanced on me. There was only one option now. Based on seeing the other demons' endings, I climbed up the tank, struggling to get footing on its curved surface. A sudden pain struck my ankle, and I screamed as I fell back to the floor. My foot missing and one tank's constant flowing onto me, I opened my eyes to see the tip of the lance, and I rolled to the side just before it struck the ground. I pushed myself back, but was caught up against a wall. My breathing became irregular, and my heartbeat matched it. I could feel my whole body vibrating, and I began to shake. The heat was like fire once again, being burned to a literal crisp. As the angel readied for its final strike, I surrendered to my collapsing form and closed my eyes, both tanks liquid pooling beneath me. The explosion destroyed my eardrums and nearly blinded me as well. With the heat of my body's mini explosion and the combined liquids beneath me, there was enough to ignite the two tanks. Between that and the collapse, there was nothing. All I recall was a brilliant white light, and the next thing I knew, I was a spirit again. Falling through the sky, metal fell upon the earth in a downpour, and the upper half of the elevator tipped over to join its lower part and smashing into the ground. Shrapnel flew from my body endlessly, yet none of it harmed me. The only pain I felt now came from being forced out of Howard's body, and a large wound in my side from where the angel had missed its mark. I never knew ghosts could bleed. The washing wind in my face carried up the distant screams of all those below, hundreds of people in the base howling as the end of the world fell upon them, and a second explosion occurred within the facility. Soon after the screams ended, and I was left alone with the wind once more. I couldn't spot the angel anywhere in the falling debris, and wondered if he had either returned to heaven or had fallen to the earth below. I don't know what happened after that though, until I was on the ground. My memory was shattered and missing in different places. Some pieces would say I hit the ground violently, others show me walking amongst the destruction of the facility. The timeline became consistent again when I was watching the sky. The moon was out, but the sky was still orange on the horizon, even though the sun was long gone. I sat up from the pool of water I was in, my mind flickering back to the forest, and then the harbor. I shook my spinning head and looked around. There were no discernible buildings left. The tower had fallen onto the main complex, crushing it. Pipes and lengths of steel stuck up from the ground everywhere, and where there wasn't metal, there was either dirt or bodies. Arm and guts flung all over fallen power lines, squished torsos resting eternally underneath concrete slabs, puddles of blood diluted by the water that was there first. And then there were the souls. Across the whole area, countless souls began to fade into view. Most were darker and harder to recognize, and they flailed helplessly as some invisible force sucked their naked bodies down into the ground. Their muffled pleas still warmed through their way through the soil until they were too far down for anyone to hear. But then there were the others. For the soul that didn't travel down to hell, they appeared just as foggy and hard to distinguish as the other. But where the sinful seemed to have a translucent shadow cloaked over them, these nude ones had a white flame spawn from their chest as they began to float upwards. The flame spread, covering their spirit in seconds, They screamed just as loud as those who traveled down, being burned by the cleansing fire of God. The pure flames ascended into the night sky, and looking up with eyes strained to hold back tears, I saw the sky open. A golden crack unfurled over the moon, and I watched them sorrowful envy as the flaming souls were taken into the pearly realm I saw before. The armored angels were there waiting, taking the righteous into their arms and coaxing them with their wings. My shaky hand extended towards them, the rays of their light shining between my outstretched fingers. Take me with you, I whispered, finally unlocking the restraints of my heart. Now that my mission was done, I could do that. It was easier to call it my mission instead of saying what I was really doing. Distancing myself from the truth made it easier to pretend that what I was doing wasn't horrible, that it was okay to kill hundreds of people for the sake of humanity. But now, with it over, the guilt swept over me. Seeing the destruction I'd brought on these innocent people, watching them join either the ranks of hell or the choirs of heaven, the responsibility of my actions finally set in, and I could finally admit the truth, my truth. I wanted to join them. I wanted to ascend into the heavens. I deserved to. Everything I did was for other people. I fucked total strangers to help Kelsey. I'd suffered in that prison for years. I had blown up a tower and killed hundreds to save billions. Tears streamed down my cheeks for the first time in years, since I was first put up in Apollyon. I continued whispering my desires, hoping someone up there would hear me and take me with them. And as I emptied the pain in my heart out onto the bloody dirt of the earth, I felt my feet begin to sink. I looked down, seeing my legs being swallowed by the earth, and I panicked to push myself back up. I wasn't ready to go back. I didn't want to, but it was not my choice to make. As the world devoured me, I recalled Lorento's final words before falling through the fires once more, frightened of the doom that awaited me. Ooh, that was Hell Has a Prison, Act 4. Sorry for the late upload. I didn't know that I would be going anywhere like yesterday and today, so unfortunately these are at late uploads, but no one watches these, so who even cares? Anyways, hopefully this gets out today, I guess, since this would be released in the morning. Ooh, the final Act 5 will be releasing soon.